I just climbed this tree. That's great. Speaking of pain, those like difficult, times of suffering and or grieving, where God seems to be more distant, and or you're like inclined to be feeling some negative emotions toward God. How to deal with them, or what are things that I've had to overcome in my dealing with them. And first off, a little semantic distinction. I think that like the difference between suffering and grief would be, I can't get a good angle. Suffering is kind of like pain, that the main fact of it is that like there is pain, whatever, and then grief is, you had something good and now you're deprived of it. So primarily the pain is that something is not there. And then in suffering it would be like something is there that's negative. Of course it's a spectrum, but yeah. Grief is scary. Yeah. I don't know how people are still like living and functioning in this world with the amount of just sheer tragedy. I've had a comparatively very easy life. The amount of sheer tragedy that some people go through and like still are somewhat functioning. I don't know. But anyway, if I know anything about the typical psychology of your devout Christian who's trying to also seek God through everything, the first thing that you're going to do in a time of suffering or grief is worry that you're not doing it right, and like you're going to become cold toward God or bitter toward God because of it. Yeah. And I think that that's unnecessary to put an extra layer of like guilt and worry that you're not doing the suffering right on top of already the pain that you're going through. And I imagine that this kind of concern would be, one, either I am no longer able to hear God, I'm far away from Him, therefore I must have made an idol of something in my life, or like it must be my fault that I can't hear clearly from God now that I'm in kind of pain. And secondly, just like being angry at God. On the first, I don't think that's the best way to understand the feeling of being far away from God, because I think it's legitimate if you had something in your life, or someone more relevantly in your life, that was like a source of God's goodness to you and like a channel of God to you, then you lose that. Naturally, you're not going to be able to connect to God in the same way as you were before through that same channel. And so you've genuinely been deprived of something very precious, and things just are dark, and you can't see or touch God as clearly as before. And that's just like a stage that exists, and it's okay to like let it take its time. I mean, in your head He's still there, etc., but yeah. And I think also, thankfully, we're Christians, so this kind of like suffering does not lack an analog in Christ's life. When He was on the cross, He said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" So feeling forsaken by God, or that you're farther from Him or He's farther from you than before, thanks to Christ being as amazing as He is and sharing in all of the parts of humanity, that's kind of also a way to have fellowship in his sufferings, because he suffered that too, and obviously was not a bad Christian in that moment of feeling separated from God. So it's okay. And then, well, I mean, it's not okay, but it's okay that it's not okay. Yeah. Then the other thing about just being angry at God, or I guess like confused, and worrying that means that you don't love God anymore, and you must like be some kind of bad Christian, and responding badly if the feelings are anger, confusion, hurt, all of that, and then perhaps wanting to hide those things and like try to shove them down and pretend you're not feeling them out of fear that God will like be upset. But I don't think so. I mean, we do feel angry when things that are unfair or confusing seem to happen, and God isn't angry God, yeah, he isn't angry back at you if you are pouring that out to him and open to what he shows you in return. Job was not very happy with God and with the way his life was going understandably, through a lot of, the book. But he continued to like keep the dialogue open between him and God, and he was expressing his anger at God to God in hopes that God would like come and justify himself and like explain himself. And eventually God did, even though like he did humble Job, I guess, and show him that he gave him and Job a new understanding of God that would allow Job to kind of comprehend-ish what had happened, or rather comprehend that he couldn't comprehend, and that was okay. And then he defended Job like against his friends. So again, does not make you faulty Christian if you are just like angry at God, or not having a great amount of peace and resignation in the circumstances. As Margaret Stringer said, who visited our church a while ago, God already knows what you're thinking and feeling, so you may as well express it to him and let him, correct you and talk you through that.